All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us for our monthly immigration series webinar that we've been hosting for the last several months now. Really appreciate you all for being here on this Tuesday. It is now September 2nd. How fast this year has flown by. So my name is Luis Ojeda, Organizing Manager with the ACLU of Northern California. Pronouns are he, him. And then Ashley's also in the back as well. If you want to introduce yourself as well, feel free to do so now.
Hi everybody, Ashley she, her. I'm the organizing director for one more week until Luis steps into the role.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Ashley. All right, so for tonight, we're going to be doing, we're doing introductions now. We'll share some high-level immigration updates from across the country, and then we'll dive into some local advocacy opportunities. Again, this is really the focus of today. We want to make sure that we are talking about what we could do locally, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end as well. We do have the Q&A feature enabled as well, so feel free to utilize that. Otherwise, we can go ahead and do Q&A towards the end of the webinar. But if any question comes to mind as we're going through the presentation, feel free to drop that into the Q&A box, and that'll be really helpful to just be able to track questions and help us out as we move forward. All right, so some immigration updates. Hopefully folks have seen all these, but just wanted to sort of pause and highlight some of these as they are coming in. So obviously we got some good news. Obviously this is a lot of rulings that I'm going to go through, excuse me, that are temporary or not quite final yet. And so obviously this is one of those. But this morning, if you didn't already hear, a federal judge said that the Trump administration's actions in terms of deploying National Guard and Marines in LA was a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which generally prohibits the use military to enforce domestic law. So this decision is likely to be appealed, and currently this only applies to California. So obviously that's really important to note. Obviously the Supreme Court has been doing a lot to defend and really hold up a lot of the Trump administration's efforts and policies, and so it's going to be interesting to see how this moves forward and whether the higher court weighs in and what they say. But another thing to note as well in terms of the decision is that this only applies to California. And as we'll be talking about this shortly, a lot of other states obviously are going to be facing challenges to the National Guard's deployment. So we're seeing this already in DC, but also as folks may have heard as well today, Chicago is now sort of a priority city that the Trump administration wants to have National Guard be deployed. And there's also many other cities that may also be targeted next. But also wanted to note that since National Guard and immigration raids have been starting in Southern California, in June, about 5,000 people have been arrested by immigration enforcement. So that's a very large number. And it's really important to note, right? These are folks who have each of them have community members, family, and so this impact goes beyond just the individual 5,000 number. These are folks who are our neighbors, who are part of our community, and so I think this is just an important number to highlight in terms of what's happening. And again, this is just in Southern California, and so obviously this doesn't account for all the massive numbers all across the country. Additionally, some more good news as well. Again, another federal court ruling blocking fast-track deportations. So we know that immigration and customs enforcement has been going to courthouses and arresting people at their ICE check-in appointments. Essentially, what they're trying to do is deport them without any due process. So the idea here is that they would arrest people and then basically immediately or very shortly thereafter remove them from the country. And this has been challenged, lots of different lawsuits, but today we got some good news in terms of this decision that essentially pushes back against this attempt to strip people of their due process rights. Folks may have heard of this term or this process known as expedited removal, which is essentially just another way of framing this process. And so I'm going to link here the case that folks can look into more and read more about. But again, this has been a tool that the administration has been using to essentially eliminate the rights that immigrants have, regardless of their immigration status. Generally speaking, everybody has rights and they shouldn't be immediately removed or deported without them being able to challenge their detention, challenge their deportation, and allow themselves to seek immigration benefits that they may be eligible for. So that's an important thing to note there. But again, this is just one ruling, lots of more challenges coming, and again, not a final order. And we'll see how the Trump administration responds and how additional courts rule as well. Additionally, a big story that happened over the weekend, again, I'm sure that folks had heard about this as well, but there was these horrifying images of unaccompanied minors from Guatemala essentially being at the brink of being deported. Many of them were on flights, getting ready to be removed from the country when a judge intervened and stopped the deportation of these 76 unaccompanied Guatemalan children, excuse me. And so obviously, again, this is something that is happening right now in the moment. There's lots of different challenges, lots of different groupings of minors that are whose cases are being challenged. But this is part of this larger effort that the Trump administration is trying to do to remove about 600 Guatemalan children. They had publicly stated that they were intending to deport these individuals in the coming weeks. And so again, this is happening right now. Everything is very much new. And so again, all of this is being challenged, and we'll see kind of how this plays out. But the administration is also claiming that they are trying to reunite them with their families, which obviously is hard to believe coming from this administration in terms of how they have handled these situations in the past. Additionally, another sort of thing to note is that the Guatemalan government is working with the Trump administration, and one of their concerns that they've raised is that some of these minors are going to be turning 18 soon, and that there's a likelihood that some of these minors may be transferred into adult detention centers, which obviously they have lots of concerns with. And so they are working with the Trump administration to facilitate their reunification in Guatemala. But again, obviously, these young folks have rights. These folks came here unaccompanied. And so obviously they have the right to seek immigration benefits, whether that be asylum or other benefits that they're seeking. And so a lot of them, as I'm sure you all read in the news articles or heard about, a lot of them are afraid to go back to their home country and have expressed lots of issues in terms of what would happen if they were to be deported. So we will see how this pans out. But again, this is really just another example of the way that this administration is continuing to expand who is eligible for deportation and who they are trying to remove from this country, and really, highlighting the fact that nobody really is safe from this administration, from deportation. Additionally, some more good news, as again, I'm sure folks heard, last month, the federal judge issued a preliminary injunction that ordered the Trump administration to stop bringing new detainees to the facility and to end operations there within 60 days. And reports there have been indicating that many of the people are being moved out and removed from that facility, and that likely it will be empty relatively soon. And so this lawsuit specifically was brought by the Friends of the Everglades, the Center for Biological Diversity, and the Miccosukee tribe. And this challenge here was essentially around environmental laws and how the process that the administration went about in opening it, essentially not following the proper guidelines and thinking about the environmental impacts of opening this facility. And so obviously this is good news in terms of the facility not remaining, but we have already seen that the governor there, Ron DeSantis, has spoken out about plans to open a couple of other facilities, also with sort of nicknames that he has been using. One is Deportation Depot, and the other one Panhandle Pokey. And these facilities would house thousands of immigrants. And so again, one facility may be closing, but he has plans to work with the administration to open additional facilities. And So this is definitely not the end of the story. And so obviously folks who are being let go or moved, no one's being let go for the most part from, as far as I know, from this facility. They're essentially just being transferred and moved out to other places. And so again, the challenges to these centers continue, and much remains to be seen in terms of what is happening. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but just wanted to highlight what's going on in DC as well. Obviously, in LA earlier this summer, a lot of the headlines were about the National Guard and the Marines being in LA, and now we've got about 2,200 National Guard troops in DC. 1,300 of which are from several other states who have sort of agreed to send their own National Guards to DC. And so obviously this is continuing an ongoing issue. And just want to highlight some of the things that they're doing include picking up trash and helping local government allegedly to enforce local laws in terms of policing. And so a lot of this, again, is sort of complicated because obviously there's been some various statements that local governments have made in terms of whether or not they're in support of National Guard being there. But obviously others and folks who live there are very concerned about what this means and really the precedents that this sets in terms of National Guard being normalized and going into more cities as well. And so again, we talked about Chicago being one of those cities that the Trump administration has highlighted as the next city where National Guard may be deployed. But he's also mentioned Baltimore, San Francisco, and New York City as potential cities where folks may be, where National Guard, excuse me, may be sent as well. And so obviously San Francisco being in California is a major concern here in terms of potential troop deployment. And so we'll see what happens with this. But again, obviously that challenge in terms of the troop deployment in LA, we're hopeful that may be good news in terms of how this proceeds. But also just wanted to highlight the statement that from our national, ACLU National, from the National Security Project, a statement that was made highlighting that President Trump is manufacturing emergencies to expand his power and create fear in major American cities, regardless of whether the president cites false crime statistics, villainizes immigrants, or claims peaceful protests as insurrection. Sending armed federal agents and military troops into our communities is unjustified and dangerous. And so again, we don't know how this is going to end and how many cities are going to be impacted in the coming weeks and months and years of this administration. But obviously what we've already seen is deeply concerning, and we continue to do everything we can to push back against these efforts. And then additionally, just wanted to highlight some sort of big picture numbers in terms of everything that we're seeing around deportation and the expansion of the deportation pipeline. So there's an article here that's linked in the Washington Post that really highlights and talks about how the administration is working to expand ICE detention capacity. So at the beginning of the year, ICE had about 50,000 spaces for individuals to house in detention, excuse me. And that number will go to about 100,000 by the end of the year. So the capacity of the administration to detain people will essentially double by the end of the year. And so again, this is very much a direct cause of all of the detention centers that the administration is attempting to open and is in the process of opening all across the country. And then folks may have also heard, and we talked about this last month, I believe, the new center in California City that is officially opened, that again has capacity for about 2,000 here in California. And again, many other facilities that the administration is trying to open. And then in terms of total numbers of deportation, as of August, middle of August, I believe the number was about 200,000 people, immigrants that the administration had deported, and about 60,000 people are currently in detention right now. So obviously if all 60,000 of those individuals are deported, that number could grow vastly. Additionally, linked here as well is an article in The Guardian where it highlights provides some numbers and charts around deportations that the administration has engaged in. And this chart, apologies if it's a little difficult to see, but this darker line is the trend line of people in ICE detention that have a criminal record. So the darker line is at the top. The gray line here is folks who have pending charges. So these are folks who were never convicted, but just have pending charges. And then this orange line here, red line, is folks who have no criminal record. So once again, from when the Trump administration took office, began in January through July, August, you can see the trend lines all going up, but specifically concerning is folks who have no criminal record, now almost meeting the trend line for folks who have criminal records. And so obviously this is a very complicated picture. Just because folks have criminal records obviously does not mean that they deserve deportation, but it is important to sort of highlight these differences as well. So super concerning just in terms of the overall deportation numbers going up, but obviously the rhetoric and the arguments that the administration has been using in terms of explaining away why they need to deport people and detain people has always been about going after folks who have criminal records and the worst of the worst, and really calling them bad people. And so this really, again, highlights that complicated explanation of everything that's happening, because clearly not everybody who's being detained has a criminal record. Some of them, again, have none. And so, again, just wanted to highlight this. And again, these will be linked for folks to take a look at more closely. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to some local advocacy opportunities. Again, the idea here is for us to just share a little bit about some ideas that folks can consider engaging in at the local level. Obviously, depending on where you are, some of these ideas or suggestions may be more likely than others. And so I think it's going to be really important for folks to consider your own communities, your own county or city or school boards, and really determine what makes the most sense. And so that's going to be an important thing to take in mind, or to keep in mind as we proceed with this conversation. But again, towards the end, when we do a Q&A, would love to hear from folks in terms of other advocacy that folks are engaging in at the local level, or other ideas that folks may be interested in exploring. So first, just want to sort of uplift some things that we've talked about in the past. So we know that this Senate Bill 627 is currently moving through the state legislature. I think it's due up for a vote any day now. And again, this is a No Secret Police Act, which would ensure that local law enforcement at all levels aren't able to conceal their identities by using face masks. And so obviously this is an issue that we've seen all across Southern California, many videos as they're doing raids and as they're doing activity in the community, folks are masked up, and it's hard to tell who they are. And so even if they're claiming to be ICE, they're not wearing any identification or not identifying themselves in any other manner. And so it really does cause a lot of confusion and fear in the community. And so this bill is making its way through the process. And so again, we encourage you to call your state representative, ask them to support the bill if they're not already. But also local elected officials can also put their own pressure. And so, whether that's passing resolutions in support of these bills, or using whatever connections they have to push for these bills, that's always a positive thing in general. So yeah, anything that's happening at the state level, local governments can also use their own connections and do all the work that they can to put pressure to make sure that they pass these bills. And so similarly, at the federal level, we talked about the Visible Act last month. So this is a bill at the federal level that was introduced by our Senator Alex Padilla and Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey, that would require federal agents to wear visible IDs and also banning masks when they're engaging in immigration enforcement. And so again, this is a bill that is introduced in the Senate, but there's another companion version that's introduced in the House. And so you're a member of Congress if they're not already supporting it. So here, obviously, our 2 state senators are supporting this bill, obviously. And so it's important for your member of Congress in the House to support that companion bill. And so that's going to be another important piece, another point of pressure that we can put. And so again, local governments can put pressure on their representatives, on their federal officials, asking them to support these bills and put pressure in order to make sure that we pass this bill. And then we've also talked about in the past school board advocacy. So there's a lot of work here that can happen. And so we've previously shared that the Trump administration is now allowing immigration enforcement to happen in so-called sensitive locations. So this includes schools, churches, and healthcare facilities. So in the past, these were generally spaces where immigration would not go into or would go into very rarely. And now we're seeing more activity in these locations. And so it's really important for schools and school districts in general to do everything they can to ensure that they're protecting students. And so that can include things like preparing and having proper training, knowing who is the designated individual who would review things like the warrants and any other information or interaction with immigration. There are also new state bills that are expected to require local school districts to update their policies. And so this is going to be another opportunity for folks to monitor what school districts are doing and to ensure that they're doing everything they can to comply with state law and again, to just prepare for the worst. We've also talked in the past about going beyond that, right? Just being more friendly in more obvious ways, right? They could collaborate with local organizations to host community forums or to provide red cards or family preparedness kits. And so it's not just about doing the bare minimum or doing what they can to meet state law, but it's also about being better just community partners with the families of students as well. So that's an important thing to note. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to discuss was this idea of going beyond state sanctuary policies. So obviously we know that the California Values Act prohibits local law enforcement from using the resources for immigration enforcement with limited exceptions. But obviously this is the bare minimum again. The state could also go further. So there has been lots of efforts in the past, most recently with the Vision Act, to essentially work towards eliminating exceptions and then also ending the transfer of immigrants from state prisons, which is currently allowed. So every year, over 1,000 individuals are transferred to ICE custody from CDCR, the state prison system. And so obviously that is a clear way that the state collaborates with immigration. And so again, there is some opportunity here for the state to go beyond what it's currently doing. And then similarly, local jurisdictions have also gone further and eliminated all local collaboration with ICE. And so if your local county if your local county is collaborating with ICE only to the extent allowed through the Values Act, they could go beyond that and essentially end all collaboration. So currently with the Values Act, our state sanctuary law, there are exceptions. There are sort of certain convictions where they are allowed to collaborate with ICE. But again, some counties have gone beyond that and essentially said, we're just not going to collaborate with ICE at all. And again, that sort of does a lot to give folks more reassurance and to rebuild trust with local law enforcement when they know that their sheriff's departments aren't collaborating with ICE at all. So that's an important thing to note, and there is some opportunity here. Like I said, it's important for folks to be familiar with their local policies. And so again, depending on where you live, your county may have already done this. They maybe have already eliminated their collaboration with ICE altogether. But if that's not the case, there is lots of model policies and other policies that can be copied from other jurisdictions that have done this already. And I think this can be a helpful way. I think oftentimes with a lot of these local conversations, a lot of it is sort of kicking the can or the buck to the federal government and saying this is a federal issue and the federal government is responsible here. And so there isn't a lot that we can do. But again, wherever there is opportunity, I think it's important for us to put pressure on our local governments to be able to do as much as they can in order to support our immigrant communities. Similarly here, and very much related, is work around sheriff accountability. And so this is work that a lot of you all from your own local work, folks from ACLU chapters specifically, have done a lot of work around sheriff accountability in terms of thinking through what role they play in this deportation pipeline. And so it's important to note that this is an area of local advocacy that folks can engage in to put pressure on their local sheriff to ensure that they're doing everything they can to limit collaboration with ICE. So recently, over the summer in July, the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, asked sheriffs in California to share a list of anyone in their jails who were not US citizens. Obviously, this would be in violation of our state sanctuary policy, the Values Act, but I think it remains to be seen if any sheriff collaborated or cooperated with that request. Obviously, not every sheriff in California is great, I would say. And so I think it's important for folks to monitor what kinds of statements, actions, policies they have in place. And if there are any sheriffs that are seeking to, ignore state law and collaborate with ICE or the federal government in any way, those are the things that are important to monitor and to pay attention to. Additionally, any jurisdiction that transfers or transfers folks in local jails are generally required to host what are called Truth Act forums. Forum is a very generous statement for these. Generally, it's just like an agenda item in a local government meeting. So maybe it's during the Board of Supervisors meeting, for example, and it's essentially just an item on that agenda, and they're required to sort of give a report of how many people were transferred and how they collaborated with ICE if they did. And so again, if your jurisdiction is collaborating with ICE, even to the extent allowed by the Values Act, generally speaking, they should be providing this sort of forum or this space for people to learn more about those numbers. And so every year, counties and cities and other jurisdictions that collaborate with ICE are supposed to report those numbers to the state. And so that information is publicly available, but it is helpful for local jurisdictions to provide more of a picture, right, in terms of like who's being transferred. We can also note patterns. So if we're seeing that the local jails are transferring more people than they were last year or the year before, those kinds of patterns are helpful to note to kind of see if there is a reason for that, and to see if there's additional information that we need to dig into or to get more information about. And so this advocacy could begin with meeting. And so it could just be about talking, learning, asking questions. What are the policies that they have? Has anything changed between now and or before the Trump administration took office and now? Have they engaged in any communication with ICE? Do they see ICE in the jail come to the jail more often? All that. And I think it's really about gathering information and having that clear line of communication, and to just be able to know what is happening and what actions the sheriff is taking. Generally speaking, the sheriff may not be viewed as someone who's sort of an obvious partner or an obvious person that may be likely to collaborate or work with the ACLU or our partners. But there are some sheriffs that are willing to have conversations at least, and it could be an opportunity again to at least get some information and then be able to adequately advocate for whatever it is that we want. And then I think there's also just sort of, again, the reassurance in the community. Again, a big concern right now is that folks are just generally mistrustful of law enforcement because of these unmasked ICE agents. And so what are the sheriff's departments doing to rebuild that trust? How are they reassuring community that that folks can go to them with issues to report crimes, or if they are a victim of crime, for them to come out and speak out against those incidents when they happen. So there's a lot of work the sheriffs can do. And then another reminder is that the sheriffs are elected officials. And so that's another important component of all of this, is that they are obviously very much in tune with the public opinion and what folks are thinking and what concerns folks have. And so it is important for folks to be able to engage with the sheriff, put pressure on them, and to ask them to take the necessary action to do everything they can in this moment as well. And then similarly, local law enforcement, local police, and district attorneys also have a major role to play in all of this. So as we shared earlier, immigration enforcement continues to expand, and all immigrants, regardless of criminal background, are now at risk. But we know that also things like the Laken Riley Act and Prop 36 have made matters worse in terms of expanding the criminalization of our community and also leading to major immigration consequences. So things like the Laken Riley Act and Prop 36, for example, that targeted shoplifting and other crimes that maybe in the past weren't as serious or weren't taken as seriously. Now folks are being made example of and charged very heavily with. And all of these things can have immigration consequences and can really be detrimental for immigrants. And even things like the Laken Riley Act, which deals with the ability to detain people who are charged, again, not convicted, but simply charged with things like burglary, theft, and shoplifting. Again, just sort of expands that pool of people who could be caught up in the immigration system. And so this is really important because local police are the ones that are enforcing these things, and they could arrest less people, right? Oftentimes they're focused on so-called quality of life issues, things like jaywalking or things like that that aren't necessarily considered serious crimes. And so in general, there's a lot that local law enforcement could do to essentially arrest less people and have less people go into that criminal to deportation pipeline. As well as the district attorneys, they are often the ones that are responsible for charging folks. And so again, very much related to Prop 36. A lot of the offenses that are now sort of eligible to be charged, a lot of them are up to the discretion of the district attorney. And so similarly, they could make a commitment to charge refuse to charge less serious offenses. I think right now there's sort of this large rhetoric that's happening all across the country around being tough on crime and making examples out of people and really just telling the story that just isn't true. And so I think it is really important for folks to be able to engage in these conversations with local police and DAs to really highlight what's actually happening, what's actually good for our community, how can we actually benefit from the use of the resources, the big resources, the large amount of resources that local police departments and DAs get, and really make sure that they're focusing on them on the most serious offenses, that they're utilizing the resources to solve, murders and, things like that really should be the focus of these agencies. And so, yeah, overall, there is some opportunity here. Again, these aren't going to be people who this may be difficult, I'll say, right? There is a lot of opportunity here, but there is a lot of pushback that is very likely, a lot of challenges that you may face in your advocacy with these entities. But again, this is a local advocacy opportunity. And obviously, as you're talking to folks in the community, building a network of folks who agree with you, the more people that are involved, the more likely they are going to be to listen to you. But again, no one is sort of immune from criticism. Everyone plays a role in this deportation pipeline, and local police and district attorneys play a big role. And so I think there is also just a lot of opportunity here to note that there is some work that can be done in this arena. Another thing that we also wanted to uplift was this idea of legal defense funds. So we know that the state has set aside funds for immigration services, including legal representation to fight deportation and support with immigration applications. So things like DACA or folks who want to apply for citizenship or other immigration benefits. But we have also seen local jurisdictions similarly put together their own funds. And so this could be at the county level or at the city level, essentially allocating local budgets to also provide more resources to folks. I think in this moment, again, the number that I mentioned earlier, 200,000 people that have been deported. And so if you think about the large amount of need that there is currently for immigration support, we know that obviously folks who are facing immigration court or anything like that, they're not guaranteed a lawyer as we are in criminal cases, right? They have to get their own attorneys, and we know that there also is a big shortage of immigration attorneys in certain parts of the state. And so it's also just a big challenge for folks to be able to support themselves when they are in those situations. And obviously folks who are going through the immigration court process or system, if they have an attorney, someone who's defending them and protecting them, they're much more likely to be able to fight their case more adequately and be able to challenge their detention and hopefully one day get free, as opposed to someone who has no attorney, is facing all this on their own. It's going to be very challenging. And so again, this is just sort of an idea. Additionally, we know that there's a lot of mutual aid groups and community-led initiatives that are coming together. But this really just shows that there's just a huge need for this, right? This isn't just something that the state or local entities can take on their own. It's also something that community members are leading on their own as well, and they're doing everything they can to support folks. And they're also connecting with their local rapid response networks, for example. And so, for example, maybe someone's detained who's the primary breadwinner of a family. And so maybe they need support with paying rent or they need groceries and things like that. I think this is all part of that broader picture of how do we support immigrants that are going through a lot of challenges in this moment. So again, another idea, we know that right now in this moment, budgets are a challenging conversation. There's a lot of work that needs to be, a lot of conversations that need to happen in order for this to even be feasible. And I know a lot of local governments are facing potential budget cuts, as we know we are facing at the state level and potentially at the local level. And so obviously this is a difficult conversation. This isn't something that would be easy by any means. But again, this is something that is something that could be helpful, right, in this moment. Having more access to legal support could go a long way. Another idea is Office of Immigrant Affairs. And so this is definitely something that can look very different depending on where we're talking. But essentially these offices are focused on providing services and information to immigrant communities. And so this is essentially having somebody in local government that essentially is taking into account the needs of the immigrant community and ensuring that city policies and proposals are informed by the needs of these communities. And they can also provide support, as I mentioned before, with the legal services, but maybe they're also being able to refer people to other local organizations who can provide legal support or other things like that. But again, it's a way for local governments to say, we care about the immigrant community, we want to figure out how to support the immigrant community, and we want to make sure that their needs are being met or at least taken into account. And so again, this can look many different ways, but I think this is another sort of just idea or potential proposal that folks could engage in with your local government to consider this. And so, yeah, I'll sort of leave it at that. Another thing that folks can work on locally is encouraging local governments to partner with rapid response networks. And so obviously, we've talked about rapid response networks all across the state. There's a ton of them, and they're all obviously in different parts of the state with different cities, different counties that have different makeups in terms of their political ideology. But similarly, there could be funding that is provided from the city or county governments to these rapid response networks to expand their capacity and sustain the networks. They could also support in publicizing networks and spreading the word, and so making sure that they see them as a valid resource for the community and that they're doing everything they can to promote them. Also by offering the use of city or county facilities. So for example, if these networks are doing clinics or trainings or other events where they're bringing people in, that the process for which they are working with the city or county to utilize their facilities aren't cumbersome, and that they're very much in partnership with them. And obviously each network is going to have their own need. And so obviously we would defer to each of the rapid response networks to identify those needs. But again, this is a moment where it's really all hands on deck. Everybody's got a role to play, and there's a lot of work that the local governments can do to support these networks to make sure that we sustain them for the long term because again, we are in year one of the Trump administration. All right, so in terms of next steps, and so sort of, lots of different ideas and for ways that people can engage, but one thing that we wanted to note was that it's important for folks to take the time to come up with a plan. Obviously, you all know your communities best. You know where there's gaps or where there's opportunities in terms of the work that needs to happen. But as always, we encourage folks to work in coalition with partners, especially immigrants' rights orgs and other groups who work with directly impacted individuals in this moment. But once you've done that, once you've connected with the right people and sort of done some planning and thinking through, obviously meeting with the local elected officials is going to be a critical component of all of this. And so it's important for folks to, start there. This is a conversation, right? We're looking for different ideas and opportunities, and you may share some of these ideas with them and they may not be interested in any of them, but they may have ideas of their own. And so I think right now what we're looking for is for people to take action, right? It's not enough for local elected officials to say they stand with immigrants and that they're opposed to the deportations that they're seeing, and to say that they think it's awful, but it's about going the next step, taking the next step, right? Taking some action, doing something meaningful that's going to have a positive impact on the lives of immigrants in the community. And so that really does start with just having a conversation. And obviously, it's important to start with elected officials who have spoken out already in support of immigrants, because again, that's obviously someone who is more likely to listen to you, as opposed to someone who's spewing anti-immigrant rhetoric, which your conversation there may be much more challenging. And then as always, we encourage folks to reach out to us if they're interested in getting support or to brainstorm more ideas for how we can advocate at the local level. And then obviously, if you all have your own ideas or suggestions for things that could happen at the local level, we'd also love to hear that. So with that, we will open it up for Q&A. So I'm just going to ask if folks could just, let's go to the Q&A first, and then we will open it up as well to see if there are some additional questions. All right, so we've got one question here. Have the 5,000 folks arrested in SoCal all been sent to detention centers? That is a great question. I imagine that there's probably a mix of this. So as we spoke about earlier, around expedited removal and essentially fast track deportations, it's likely that many folks could have been impacted by that and essentially picked up, arrested, and deported. Others potentially could have been held in detention centers. Felicity in the chat is sharing that they've gotten some folks out on bond, and so that is also a possibility. Folks who are arrested and essentially are being held and then are given a dollar amount essentially that they have to pay in order to get out. And so not everybody who has been arrested has necessarily been deported. So great. We have, what can we do about detention centers here in California? There's lots of organizing that is happening. I think even right now, tonight, if I'm not mistaken, folks are organizing still around the California City Detention Center. So as I shared earlier, the California City Detention Center essentially opened. They're beginning to bring folks into that center, despite maybe not going through the proper channels and all the processes. And so folks are definitely continuing to organize and to push back against the opening of this detention center. And then there is also lots of work happening in the Bay Area around, for example, the potential opening of the center in Dublin. So I know there's lots of organizing happening there. But I think in general, again, it's really important for folks to be connected with their local organizing and immigrants' rights organizations and spaces to make sure that you're in the loop about what are the detention centers that are being rumored or that folks are hearing about. And then folks are really arguing and pushing back and doing everything they can to prevent them from opening them whenever possible. So definitely just the beginning, and I'm sure that there will be lots more opportunity for folks to push back. We have another question. Do those counted as having a criminal record, people whose crime is being undocumented? That's a great question. My assumption is probably not. I think generally speaking, the way that those things are tracked are through the criminal system. So, whatever thing they were charged with in criminal court. I can't say for sure whether there has been examples of folks being charged whose only crime is being undocumented. But again, as we noted, some folks are being detained even if they have no criminal record. So I think this is really part of that, where it's really anyone who's undocumented or is an immigrant, is brown at this point, really is sort of being targeted in one way or another. What is local law enforcement allowed to do under SB 54? Great question. So, and I can definitely make sure to include some more resources for folks to look at in terms of SB 54, the California Values Act. But that really has to do with allowing certain convictions to certain folks who are convicted of certain crimes to essentially be transferred to ICE. And so it is important for folks to note that there are certain convictions. If somebody is convicted of generally felonies or more serious crimes, they are allowed, local counties are allowed to then transfer them to ICE. And so you can take a look at those exceptions. So, but those are the sort of the exceptions that allow them to collaborate with ICE, as opposed to someone who has maybe a misdemeanor or a low-level crime. And in those situations, they are not eligible to be transferred. Are there any jurisdictions that are advocating for their immigrant community as an example of what other communities can do? Yeah, I mean, I think right now, looking at what folks are doing in Southern California, I think it's really inspiring, right? I think they've really been showing the importance of organizing and pushing back and defending each other. Lots of different community spaces and networks and community organizations that are doing really amazing work to do what they can to make sure that they're organizing themselves, spreading their awareness about their rights to their community, and doing everything they can to prepare. So I think those are examples. But I think more specifically, even just big cities like LA and San Francisco and others, I think have done a lot and have done a lot of work in terms of providing more services to immigrants and things like that. But there is definitely good work happening out there. Does the ACLU have model language for better local policies about cooperating with ICE and PRAs? Yes, can definitely include links to this. The ICE Out of California Coalition, if you go to iceoutofcalifornia.org, is a great place to start. They have model policies, but also just policies for many, if not most, counties in California. So you can take a look at those, and you can also take a look at the model policies that you could consider approaching your local jurisdiction with if you think that yours are not that strong. And they do also have some information about public records requests and how you can look into more information about how your local sheriff and police are collaborating with ICE. So I'll make sure to share that in the follow-up. One slide said that 200,000 people have already been deported. That's a huge number. Where have they been sent? Yeah, that's a great question. The article that I was looking at that didn't include the breakdown from countries, but I'll see if I can find something from DHS or ICE that has some breakdown in terms of where folks are being sent to. We did share a map at the last session that sort of had some examples of different countries where people are going. Obviously, not everybody is being deported to their country of origin or their home country. And so obviously that is a big concern. But yeah, I'll see if I can find some more information in terms of that. There's a question about holding the Ventura County Sheriff accountable. So if you are in Ventura County, definitely maybe let folks know in the chat. And maybe this anonymous participant can connect with you on that. But anonymous participant, encourage you to reach out to ACLU SoCal and let me know if you need support with that. But I know that there is a ton of organizations there in Ventura County that are doing great work. So definitely want to encourage folks to, again, connect with your local organizations. Julie Beer, I thought jaywalking was now legal in California. Am I wrong? No, you are right. That was probably not the best example, but I think that was just the first example that came to mind in terms of a low-level reason why law enforcement would come after you. But yes, you can now jaywalk. Generally, you're supposed to do it when there's safely, right? There's sort of some restrictions there, but yes, encourage folks to jaywalk safely. Does the ACU have the resources to defend people who take more direct action, like 1960s civil disobedience? Great question. I would say I encourage you to reach out if you have some specific questions about that. Definitely don't want to discuss those types of things on a public webinar, but definitely can share some resources or some suggestions for this as well. How would we find local immigrant mutual aid, legal defense funds to donate to? Great question. I think the best place to start is with your rapid response networks. I think generally speaking, those networks are often tied to local legal defense funds or other mutual aid groups. And so I would encourage you to go to your local rapid response network website and use that as a starting point. And if you're not able to find information about that, feel free to reach out and we can help identify those. How do we find our local ACLU group to work with locally on immigration? Great question. Anonymous participant, feel free to go to aclunc.org. You can look at our chapter section there. You can also reach out at changemakers, aclunc.org, or reach out to me and I can get you connected depending on where you are. How can we get local sheriffs to forego federal funds and stop cooperating with ICE? Great question, Mickey. I think that is a very long-term advocacy campaign that's probably needed. I think oftentimes local sheriffs obviously care very much about federal funding, and it's going to be a big push to get them to stop cooperating with ICE. So definitely would love to chat more about what opportunities exist, but definitely don't want to understate the challenge that will be as well. Is there a way to cover immigrants' bonds? Great question. I would say that there is ways to cover immigrants' bonds. There are lots of different organizations that help with covering immigrants' bonds. So this is definitely something that has been identified as a big need. Oftentimes people get huge immigration bonds that they have to pay and are unable to do so. And so they will often turn to various community organizations or community groups that can support them with that. And again, I think the local rapid response network is a great place to start. They're going to generally know who the local legal landscape is in terms of immigration support and what types of organizations or groups may cover immigrants' bonds. Everyone should ask their sheriff, board of supervisors if they are getting funds from the feds under the state criminal alien assistance program, which reimburses local jurisdictions for the cost of holding undocumented immigrants in jail. We brought it to the attention of our sheriff in Santa Cruz County. He wasn't aware his office was using it, received over $2,000 last year from the program, and has now stopped participating in it. Great suggestion, Peter. Yes, lots of different programs exist, and I think that's a great example of the state criminal alien assistance program. There is some opportunity there, and it sounds like they have had some success in Santa Cruz. Hi, what can be done to protect immigrant families when they are going or when leaving immigration agencies? People I have seen recorded videos. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, great question. And I'm assuming you're referring to immigration court or ICE check-ins and things like that. Again, want to uplift immigration, the rapid response network, excuse me. Those are great spaces to organize. They oftentimes can help with getting folks to accompany folks to those check-ins or the immigration or even criminal court hearings, to at least be able to have somebody go with them. And then again, in the event of somebody being detained, they're able to then mobilize their network to connect them with the legal support that they need and to do everything they can to help them in those situations. Another question, the ICE facility in Camarillo has a pan tilt camera that was installed in the last year by the local sheriff's office. This is statistically a low crime area in Ventura County. It seems to be able to monitor community rapid responders and protesters. Does that violate First Amendment freedoms under the California Values Act? It seems retaliatory given no others in the area. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think generally speaking, this is pretty common in terms of cameras being installed around government facilities in general, but would love to learn more about this specific situation. And again, if this is something that that we could look into, we could definitely talk more about that. Noam said something like $1.2 million people have self-deported. Is this true? Okay, 1.2 million people have self-deport. Is this true? That's a good question. I have not seen that large of a number, but I think this is definitely a trend and a pattern that we're noticing, that folks are choosing to self-deport rather than face potential immigration detention. And so again, can't verify this number, but we can definitely see if there's some additional statistics. And then Gino also did share ice.gov/statistics. You can scroll down for deportations. Not sure if they're tracking self-deportations, and also don't know how GNOME what system they would use to track those, but that's certainly a potential there. What organizations? Okay, yes, there was a question about the bonds, and again, I would encourage you to look to reach out to the local rapid response networks, and if you know someone who needs support with paying their immigration bond, I think that's probably the best place to start in terms of getting that support. All right, we've got about 2 minutes. Wanted to just see if there was any additional questions. Appreciate you all for asking all those questions. But any other questions that folks want to, oh, there's one more. What are activists being charged with? That's a great question. I think right now we're seeing the administration is being very creative with the way that they go after people. So it is very important for folks to do some risk assessment, understand the potential for facing serious charges. I think that the administration is definitely trying to intimidate people and charge people with very serious offenses. And again, as I mentioned earlier, folks who have immigration, who are non-citizens or who have potential to be negatively impacted by immigration or by any charges. And if you're an immigrant, I think it's really important for folks to take that into account. But I think, again, if you are being charged with something, you're an activist, we encourage you to reach out to us and we can definitely look into that. But I can't say for sure if the charges are sort of the same all across. I think it definitely depends. We've seen a variety of them. Can a person self-deport safely without risk of detention? Great question. I think that there are certainly ways, and I would encourage folks to, I would encourage folks similarly, reach out to your rapid response network. I think they are likely to have more additional resources that can share. But there is certainly ways that people can do that without avoiding avoiding detention. Is the Bail Project organization helping immigrants? That's a great question. I'm not entirely sure, but again, can work on getting an answer to the Bail Project and whether they're helping immigrants. All right, well, we are at time. We're going to go ahead and close out for the night, but again, we encourage you to reach out at changemakers@ecounc.org if you have any additional questions or if there's anything else that you have questions about. Felicity, thank you. Looks like there's a ocjusticefund.org. And again, many of these funds are going to be location-based or geographically based. And so they may be able to help you, or maybe they can refer you to another group in other locations. But yeah, there's definitely a ton of them. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and close out. But again, really appreciate you all for sticking with us and hope you all have a lovely night. Thank you so much.